a motorcycle powered by an actual car engine, a bike so advanced it cost twice as much as a BMW, and only 38 people ever owned one, and a rotary machine your insurance company taxed like an 882 cubic centimeter superbike, even though it made about 30 horsepower. The 1970s were the strangest, most brilliant decade motorcycling ever had. But while everyone still talks about the Honda CB750 and the Kawasaki Z1, the wild bikes got buried and forgotten. These are 10 motorcycles from the 1970s that almost nobody remembers, and everyone was years ahead of its time. We are counting all the way down to the rarest of them all, a machine so exclusive almost nobody alive has ever seen one run. Let's start in Germany. Number 10. The Hercules W-2000. In 1974, a German company that mostly built bicycles and mopeds did something nobody else had managed. Fichtel & Sachs dropped a Wankel rotary engine into a production motorcycle and actually put it on sale. This was the first rotary-powered production bike in the world, beating Suzuki and everyone else to it. The engine was a tiny 294 cubic centimeter single rotor unit that started life in a snowmobile, and on paper it was the future. No pistons hammering up and down, just one spinning rotor, smooth and almost silent. It made around 30 horsepower and would run to about 90 miles an hour, which was perfectly respectable back then. So why did they build only 1,784 of them? And here's the part that's genuinely stupid. Because of the strange way you measure a rotary's displacement, the insurance companies decided the little Hercules counted as an 882 cubic centimeter machine. So you were paying superbike money to insure a bike that made about the same power as a mid-sized twin. Nobody was going to do that. The W-2000 quietly died in 1977. But that snowmobile-derived rotary engine did not die with it. Its DNA ended up inside the Norton rotaries that raced in Britain a decade later. So the forgotten German oddity nobody bought turned out to be the seed of something much bigger, and it was only the beginning of the rotary madness on this list. Number 9. The Harley Davidson XLCR. Picture 1977. Harley is owned by AMF, its reputation is in the gutter, and Japanese superbikes are eating the company alive. And into that mess walks Willie G. Davidson, grandson of one of the founders, with the most un-Harley Harley ever made. The XLCR was a cafe racer, all black, blacked out engine, blacked out pipes, a little bikini fairing up front, and a stance ripped straight off Harley's XR750 flat track racer. Under it sat the 998 cubic centimeters Ironhead Vi twin, making around 60 horsepower, which made it the fastest Harley you could buy at the time. It should have been a hit. It was gorgeous. Instead, it bombed. The Harley faithful wanted big, comfortable cruisers and did not want a black European-style racer with a hard seat and low bars. And the people who actually wanted a cafe racer just bought something Italian or Japanese that handled better. Harley built it for barely 2 years. Only about 3,100 ever left the factory, which by Harley numbers is basically nothing. The strange part is what happened next. That commercial flop is now one of the most collectible Harleys of the whole era, worth many times its original $3,595 price tag. The bike nobody wanted became the bike everybody wants. And our next entry is another achingly pretty machine that died almost immediately, this time in Britain. Number 8. The Triumph X75 Hurricane. By the early 1970s, the British motorcycle industry was on fire, and not in a good way. So when the American designer Craig Vetter got his hands on a BSA Rocket 3 Triple, he did something the stiff British bosses would never have dared. He turned it into rolling sculpture. The Hurricane had this long, low, swoopy, one-piece fiberglass tank and tail, a skinny front end, and 3 chrome exhaust pipes stacked up the right side like a musical instrument. Underneath was a 740 cubic centimeter air-cooled triple, making about 58 horsepower. It was not the fastest bike of its day. That was never the point. It looked like nothing else on the road. And that look mattered more than anyone realized at the time. The Hurricane is often credited as the bike that invented the factory custom. The idea that a manufacturer could sell you a styled, cruiser-flavored machine straight off the showroom floor. Almost every factory custom that came after owes it something, so of course they barely made any. Only around 1,150 Hurricanes were ever built, and it was strangled after a single model year, partly by new American noise regulations. Vedder reportedly had to fight for months just to get paid for the design, a machine that pointed at the entire future of motorcycle styling, gone almost before it arrived. But if you want proof that Japan was capable of building something just as strange, our next entry is where it gets really weird. Number 7. The Suzuki RE5. While the Germans were fiddling with rotary engines, the Japanese decided to have a proper go too, and Suzuki went the furthest of anyone. In 1974, it released the RE5, the only rotary-engined motorcycle a Japanese company ever put into full production, and Suzuki did not do it quietly. The RE5 used a 497 cubic centimeters liquid-cooled single-rotor Wankel, making 62 horsepower, good for around 112 miles per hour. Suzuki even hired Giorgetto Giugiaro, the legendary Italian designer behind everything from Lotus to the DeLorean, to style it. He gave it a wonderful cylindrical instrument pod and a matching taillight, both shaped like little tin cans. It looked like the future had arrived early. Then the dream fell apart. The rotary drank fuel, it ran ferociously hot, and it struggled to meet the emissions rules that were closing in fast. Riders loved how smooth it was and hated everything it cost them to keep running. Suzuki pulled the plug after just 2 years, and only around 6,000 were ever built. The company had bet big on the rotary being the engine of the future, spent a fortune developing it, and then walked away. So that is 2 dead rotaries down, 2 companies that gambled on the Wankel and lost. But our next bike had no interest in being clever. It just wanted to be the fastest thing on the planet, and for a while, it was. Number 6. The Laverda Jota. Laverda was a small Italian firm that also happened to build farm machinery, which tells you something about how these bikes were put together. They were big, heavy, and built like a tractor in the best possible way. And in 1976, Laverda, working with its British importer, the Slater Brothers, turned its 1000 triple into an absolute monster called the Jota. The Jota ran a 981 cubic centimeters air-cooled triple with hot cams and high-compression pistons, making around 90 horsepower. That does not sound wild today, but in 1976 it made the Jota the fastest production motorcycle in the world. Not one of the fastest, the fastest. It was timed at 137.76 miles per hour at the Miera Proving Ground in England by the writer Bob Curry for Motorcycle magazine. The first time a road bike you could actually buy had been clocked that fast under proper test conditions. It was also brutal. The clutch was heavy, the vibration was ferocious, and it demanded a rider who knew exactly what they were doing. This was not a friendly bike, it was a weapon. And that was precisely why the people who rode one never forgot it. The Jota went on to dominate production racing in Britain and became a legend to a small, devoted crowd, while the rest of the world was busy buying smoother, easier Japanese 4s. Speaking of the Japanese, our next bike proves you did not need 1,000 cubic centimeters to embarrass a superbike. You just needed 2 strokes. Number 5, the Yamaha RD400. Everything on this list so far has been rare or exotic or wildly expensive. The RD400 was none of those things. It was a cheap, light, ordinary-looking Yamaha, and it absolutely terrified people on much bigger bikes. The secret was the engine, a 399 cubic centimeters reed valve 2-stroke twin, making around 44 horsepower, wrapped in a chassis that weighed almost nothing. On a twisty road, a good rider on an RD400 could hang on to and sometimes humiliate riders on 750 bikes and leader bikes that cost twice as much. They called it the Giant Killer, and it earned the name. 2 strokes like this were raw and a bit smoky and completely addictive. They came alive when the revs climbed and the power hit all at once, and there was nothing else on the road that felt quite like it. But that smokiness was also a death sentence. New emissions rules in America were closing in on the two-stroke street bike, and there was no way this engine was going to survive them. Yamaha squeezed out one final version, the 1979 RD400F, using a clever exhaust trick to sneak past the regulations for a single last year. And then the air-cooled two-stroke street bike was gone for good. Quick one before we get to the big stuff. If you are enjoying this and you like motorcycle history that goes past the same 5 famous bikes, hit subscribe and stick around, because the top 4 are the strangest of the whole lot. Right, back to it. Our next machine took the exact opposite approach to going fast. Instead of small and light, it went completely insane. Number 4, the Münch Mammut. In the mid-1960s, a German engineer named Friedel Münch looked at the motorcycles of his day and decided they were nowhere near powerful enough. So he did the obvious thing. He took an engine out of a car. The Mammoth, which means mammoth, used a 1,177 cubic centimeter 4-cylinder engine lifted straight from the NSU Prince, a small German saloon, in a motorcycle in the 1960s. It made up to around 90 horsepower at a time when most bikes made half that, which is a genuinely strong argument that the Mammoth, not the Honda CB750, was really the world's first superbike, and it beat the Honda to it by a couple of years. And Münch kept going. The later fuel-injected version, the TTS-E, was one of the very first production motorcycles anywhere with fuel injection. He even cast a special rear wheel, because ordinary wire spokes literally snapped under the power. This thing was hand-built, over-engineered, and utterly uncompromising. It was also financially insane. A Mammoth cost around 2.5 times as much as a BMW, and Münch was permanently on the edge of bankruptcy trying to build them. Fewer than 500 were ever made, and only about 130 of the fuel-injected ones. The historian Hugo Wilson called it simply the fastest, most powerful, most expensive bike of its time. Now, if a car engine in a motorcycle sounds mad, our next bike went the other way entirely. It obsessed over one thing almost nobody else cared about: the frame. Number 3, the Bimota SB2. Most manufacturers in the 1970s built an engine and then wrapped a frame around it. A tiny Italian company called Bimota did the exact opposite, and in doing so, it basically invented the modern superbike. Bimota was founded in 1973 by 3 men, and the surnames of 2 of them, Bianchi and Mori, plus their partner Tamburini, gave the company its name. The genius of the whole operation was Massimo Tamburini. For the SB2, he took the engine from a Suzuki GS750 and treated it as a stressed member of the chassis, meaning the engine itself became part of the frame's strength. The bike had a lightweight tubular frame, a monoshock rear end, a swing arm that pivoted in line with the countershaft, and bodywork years ahead of anything else on the road. Some of the ideas on this bike, like routing the exhaust up under the seat, were so advanced that Tamburini would not fully realize them until nearly 2 decades later on a machine you have definitely heard of: the Ducati 916, one of the most beautiful motorcycles ever built. So the SB2 is, in a very real sense, the grandfather of the 916, and almost nobody has heard of it because Bimota built just 140 of them. When the supply of Suzuki engines dried up, the remaining frames were reportedly scrapped. Which brings us to the final 2, and number 2 did something no motorcycle company on earth had ever managed before. Number 2, the Benelli 750 Se. In 1972, the Italian firm Benelli, then run by the Argentine businessman Alejandro de Tomaso, rolled a motorcycle onto a stand in front of the world's press that made everyone stop and count. Because sticking out of the sides of this thing were 6 exhaust downpipes. 6. The Benelli 750 Se, being Italian for 6, was the world's first production 6-cylinder motorcycle. Nobody had ever sold one before. Its 748 cubic centimeter engine was silky smooth in a way 4-cylinder bikes simply could not match. and De Tomaso reportedly used the unveiling to more or less declare war on the Japanese manufacturers who were busy taking over his industry. It should have been a landmark, and in engineering terms it truly was, but it also cost a fortune, and Benelli was a small company without the muscle to build it in real numbers. Only around 3,200 of the 750 say were made. Then, a few years later, Honda released its own six-cylinder machine, and Kawasaki built a giant six of its own, and both of them buried the little Benelli that got there first. Benelli got there before anyone else and got almost nothing for it, which leaves just one bike, the rarest, the most advanced, and the most quietly insane machine on this entire list, and you have almost certainly never heard its name. Number 1, the Veen OCR1000. We started this list with a rotary engine, and we are going to end with one because in 1974 a Dutchman named Henk van Veen decided that the rotary motorcycle everyone else had failed to get right was going to be his masterpiece. He wanted to build the finest motorcycle in the world, full stop. And for one brief moment, he did. The OCR 1000 used a 996 cubic centimeters twin-rotor Wankel engine sourced from the same European project that supplied Citroën, making a genuine 100 horsepower and running to about 135 miles per hour. It was smooth, it was fast, it was beautifully built, and it even had a gearbox designed by Porsche. Everything the Hercules and the Suzuki Rotaries had promised and failed to deliver, the Van Veen actually pulled off. There was just one problem. It was the most expensive production motorcycle in the world, costing about twice what a top-of-the-range BMW did. And then the European company that built its rotary engine nearly collapsed, and the supply of engines simply dried up. So how many did Henk van Veen manage to build? 38. That is not a typo. In total, only 38 of the greatest rotary motorcycle ever made ever existed, which is why you can ride bikes your whole life and never once see one in the flesh. And that is the strange, beautiful truth about the 1970s. The bikes we remember won, but the bikes we forgot were often the ones swinging hardest. If you want to see how the Japanese giants these machines were fighting actually took over the entire motorcycle world, that story is waiting for you right now.